Executive Director at the Alabama Council of Developmental Disabilities, and Mr. Jeff Davis, the Chief Idea Creator at Fowler Davis LLC. Today, we're going to be talking about human trafficking, specifically in the disability community here in Alabama. At this point, I'd like to hand it over. Mr. Powell, if you could introduce yourself and give us a little background on ACDD.
Okay, thank you, Alex. There again, like Alex has said, my name is Darryle Powell. I'm the Executive Director for the Alabama Council on Developmental Disability. I'm working on my third year here, so I've been a part of the council for 3 years, nearly 3 years. And prior to joining the council, I served in private nonprofit sector for more than 20 plus years, served individuals, families throughout the state of Alabama. And to give you a little bit about the council, we are a federally funded mandated program, um, total of about 56 of us. So we worldwide, 56 strong. We are part of the National Association of Councils on Development and Disability, headquartered out of Washington, D.C. And of course, we serve on the Department of Mental Health. Mental Health is our designated state agency. So we also part of the Disability Network, in which consists of the council, consists of the ADAP, Protection of Advocacy, which is ADAP, and of course our Universal Center on Disability. So there's three agencies that makes up the Disability Network. So that's a little bit about our council. We're funded through the Department of Health and Human Services. So that's how we are able to fund our projects.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. And for everybody that's familiar with Alabama Care and ACDD, they are our primary source of funding. And I know that they put out a number of grants every year. So please go to acdd.org. You can see upcoming proposals. You can get a grant for a year and up to 3 years if you work well with Mr. Powell and his team. So, and Mr. Davis, if you would introduce yourself and Fowler Davis LLC.
Yeah, my name is Jeff Davis. I'm the Chief Idea Creator for Fowler Davis LLC. My business partner, Barbara Fowler, and I started the company 7 years ago. And we started the company with a purpose of doing good work and putting positive things back into the community. And we've been fortunate enough to work with ACDD for the last few years on several different projects. And we're really proud of this project to bring awareness and prevention to the trafficking of people with developmental and intellectual disabilities.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for the work that you do with ACDD. And now we're going to kind of jump into it here. Human trafficking. Why is this such a big area for both ACDD and for Fowler Davis? Why are we tackling this, and what exactly is human trafficking for anybody that's unfamiliar with what it all entails?
I can maybe start with that. Human trafficking is in several different forms. There's human trafficking on the side of human sex trafficking, and forcing someone or coercing someone to do things against their will sexually with other people for money. And then there's also a labor trafficking side of it, to where you're forcing someone to work in a job that they don't want to do and that they're not necessarily getting paid to do. And it's so important right now because it's a $150 billion a year business worldwide. And what's prevalent is with Alabama and the location where we are, with the interstates that run through I-65, I-20, and then the new I-22 corridor, and then I-10 down in Mobile. It's a trafficking highway where these traffickers are bringing people back and forth, and it's almost becoming sort of a hub for human trafficking. And that's what we're wanting to really bring awareness to, and have that prevention there to help these people.
Yeah, I saw that. Or go ahead, Mr. Powell. I'm sorry.
No, just saying, to add on what Jeff has indicated, and of course in the United States, people with developmental disabilities are 4 to 10 times more likely to be victimized than people without a disability. And children with disabilities are more than twice as likely to be victimized as children without disabilities. So when looking at these numbers, it becomes frightening for us to even think about it, and when thinking about the silent epidemic, the disability community is greatly impacted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would go ahead.
I was going to say, let me add one more thing that I wanted to say was most people think of trafficking and all as someone that's like bound and tied up and kidnapped, and that is so very, very low on the number scale. Most of these people are living in plain sight day to day, and where they're bound is basically physically and emotionally, or psychologically and emotionally. They're bound to their pimps or to the people that are trafficking them, and they're scared to do anything and to break away from
it. I was so there's a few different forms of trafficking that you mentioned. There's sex, and I think that's the one that kind of gets the most attention on the headlines. You hear about it all the way up to Epstein and the DC, that kind of stuff. But then there's also, as you mentioned, domestic servitude and labor. And then there's a financial trafficking as well, where people can take advantage of financial SSI, stuff like that. And so there's a bunch of different forms there. And as you mentioned, it's not always the bound kind of in the dungeon, but it's they're in plain sight, in the community. Now, you mentioned that there's kind of a highway here and a hub of trafficking, human trafficking in Alabama, and the I-20 highway between Birmingham and Atlanta has been donated as kind of the super highway of human trafficking. And that kind of caught me off guard because I would think it would be somewhere between like New York and Boston or Philly or some of these bigger cities. Why do you think that we have such a hub here in Alabama?
Well, the reason we have such a hub here in Alabama is because we have so many main arteries of interstates that connect other parts of the country. If you look at Birmingham in the center of the state, you've got I-20 that runs all the way down from Mobile and Mississippi all the way up to Atlanta and beyond. And then you've got I-65 that goes all the way up to Chicago. And you have these big cities that Birmingham's almost like a conduit to connect those cities for the traffickers.
So we just happen to be kind of geographically a major artery to a lot of the bigger cities there. Right. I've heard that the I-20 between Birmingham and Atlanta is just they arrest quite a bit of human trafficking perpetrators and are able to save a lot of victims there. Now, Mr. Powell, you mentioned that human trafficking greatly affects the disability community. Why do you think that is?
Well, Alex, that's a good question. When you think about people living with intellectual development disability, that is a high-risk, vulnerable population. So this population has been a target population for traffickers just due to their vulnerabilities. So I think when people consider or look at people as having a certain disability, that just heightens the opportunity for individuals to prey on that vulnerable population. And as we meet, there are several ongoing cases, even right now as we speak, that really would just break your heart. And last week I had a privilege to attend a conference, National Association conference in DC. And the conversation came up, I was only there for a few days, and the conversation came up 2 to 3 times in regards to people living with disabilities being a target for traffickers. So it's greatly impacted. And even when I came home, the conversation came up in regards to people having disabilities that are trafficked, throughout our state. And it's a worldwide problem, not just Alabama. So I just excited to work with Fowler Davis to get the word out, because it's just our population is greatly impacted.
I think as you mentioned, those with disabilities sometimes need to rely on more of a community for their human needs, for their human basic needs, and that can bring opportunities for exploitation. And that was a word that I continually saw when I was doing some research about this, is exploitation and human trafficking kind of going hand in hand. And you mentioned that it was the talk up at your conference. Without getting into too specific details, can you give us some examples so that we can take these the human trafficking and what we think of domestic servitude and labor and financial exploitation, and we can kind of solidify that so that we might be able to see that in our community if we're familiar with it.
Well, yes, a couple of things we've kind of emphasized and highlighted. Just kind of getting the word out to people to make people aware. Those helping them understand the signs, and we've also talked about the issue of technology. And of course, technology can be a curse or a blessing. And with the new technology, it makes things much easier, much more easy, for people with sexual interests to contact their victim directly. And with all these online gaming tools, it's easy for offenders to pretend, to be someone who they're not, to be a different agenda, age. So. Um, just talking about the technology, just worldwide, and how can we as a council or as an organization or just the whole association bring awareness to this very important topic so that way people will know, when they are involved, or at least how to seek help when they're actually involved, because sometimes people are involved and don't know which way to turn because of their fear of what they will what people would do to them by trying to seek help. So just talking about the technology, how can we as a nation, bring awareness to it, and of course, every chance I get, I highlight the projects that we're doing that emphasize certain areas. So of course, I talked about. Fowler Davis, our collaboration with Fowler Davis, just trying to get everybody on board, school system, Department of Human Resources, the law enforcement, because this is it's a huge issue. And just when I was involved with the World Games a couple of weeks ago, that I was very excited to learn that Fowler Davis had some input into the training um, materials for the people who are involved in the World Games, because you know big events is a just a hub just ready to move, just a just where people take advantage. So I think they had cards, they had wristbands, they had numbers that for all of the volunteers, people who were involved with the World Games. So that just lets you know how huge the problem is.
Yeah, and I heard that there was some couple thousand athletes that were here in Birmingham during the time, hundreds of countries, people from all
Mhm.
around the world coming together. And when you have those big hubs, such as Super Bowls, big events like that, it can kind of make way for that trafficking that we're talking about. So you were mentioning technology is a double-edged sword there, where it can provide a lot of positives as we're doing right now. We're able to have this broadcast using technology, but it also opens the door for predators and victims, and predators to try and reach the younger there. That's kind of I remember growing up, it's like, no, you're too young to have a phone. But you see phones in younger and younger hands these days. And that can also be, an opportunity there that you have to really kind of monitor as a parent, as a community there. So we were kind of talking about these big events and technology there. Are there other examples of trafficking and exploitation that we should be aware of? And what exactly, like, what does financial exploitation or financial human trafficking look like in the disability community?
Um,
Jeff, you want to tackle that, and then I can chime in if needed.
Sure, I'll be glad to. The signs of financial exploitation are it's pretty simple. You have someone that's maybe a caretaker for an elderly individual, and that elderly individual gets a Social Security check each month. Well, where you find that financial exploitation is they get that elderly person to sign over the check to them, they steal the check from them and go and cash it, but that money is not being used to care for that person. That is the biggest part right there, where you see the financial exploitation, where they take money out of funds that are there to care for that individual and they use it for their own gain.
Mm. That would be like something where, yeah, I'll go, just give me your check and everything will be fine. I'll make sure everything's taken care of for you. But the money doesn't actually go back to taking care of the individual, doesn't go back to putting
Correct.
food on their table, doesn't go back to their overall well being there.
Right.
Uh, And I'm sure you see that in a lot situations where somebody can't speak up on their own behalf, or maybe you have someone that you mentioned is elderly and can't really speak out or get a hold of services or feel like, as you mentioned, they don't want to. Maybe they feel like this is how it should be, or anything along that lines. What would you say to somebody that is being human trafficked or exploited, who may be going through some of those feelings?
It's one of those things that you really have to kind of step back and take a look at the signs. And what's complicated about the signs of someone that's being trafficked is, even though they may show some signs of human trafficking, it doesn't necessarily mean they're being trafficked. You really have to know the individual and to figure things out. What we always say is, when in doubt, always report it. We would much rather see someone have something reported for them, and the authorities be able to check it out and make sure that it is okay, that whatever the situation is, that they're okay, than it is to not say something at all. And this part is to watch for people in change in behavior. If they're normally, they've never been malnourished in the past, but all of a sudden you're starting to see them lose weight and they're not being fed and they're not being taken care of, then that could be a sign of something, that someone is controlling them, and there might be some underlying situations there. If they all of a sudden become fearful, anxious, or depressed, as a different type of mood than they usually were typically, so a lot of times that's a sign. But the main thing is just to really understand the situation that they're in, and to make sure that they're being taken care of.
So you mentioned a sudden change in behavior. There's kind of a big sign that someone may be being taken advantage of them. So pay attention to that. If you have a friend that's, suddenly their mood changes and they're not that happy-go-lucky friend that they normally are, check in with them. Ask, some of their family and friends how everything is going. If you notice them losing weight, spend some time with them, reach out to them. Now, what are my options as a friend if I notice somebody in my circle who I think is being taken advantage of? What are my options to make a claim or to reach out to the authority there?
Well,
Your first option. Go ahead,
go
Darryle.
ahead. Go ahead, Jeff. You got it.
No,
You good?
your first option is to always, when in doubt, call 911. Call the authorities and let them take it from there and handle it. The last thing you want to do is sort of insert yourself into that situation that could make something worse, or could end up with a much worse end result. The Alabama Department of Human Resources and the Adult Protective Services has a hotline that you can use to call. Homeland Security. There's several different agencies, and on the website that we are doing right now for the human trafficking campaign with ACDD, we have all those resources there with the phone numbers and ways to contact
them. And we'll go ahead and put that in chat. I believe it's acdd.org/human trafficking, or just mention trafficking.
Actually, it's just trafficking. Yes.
Excuse me, Clifton, if you would go ahead and put that in there. Kind of from a parent standpoint, I know it can be very scary for parents when they hear these stories, and maybe they have young kids, daughters, sons, and what would you say to them? How can we do some basic training for our children to try and help them be aware of bad scenarios or maybe bad people, teaching them about the technology, and then also out in public? What are some pointers for some parents?
Well, I think one thing, being involved with our kids, talk to our kids, spend time with our kids. That's one of the first avenues that we could take. And in regards to parental controls and privacy setting, ensure that we have those settings on our devices. Although they're not 100% effective, they will kind of give you an idea to kind of decrease that. But those are important avenues and useful tools to help minimize. Talk to our kids, encourage them to talk to you, because sometimes, a parent talking to a kid the child, that kid may not be in a position or may not feel comfortable to talk to a parent. So developing a relationship with your child, to encourage that child, and just communicate, just be around it. And like Jeff has indicated, you got to observe their action. If the action change or behavior change, then it's probably time to see what's going on. Why did that behavior change? And dealing with our kids, you have to be on a kid's level. So sometimes, you may have to, instead of acting as you're talking to adult, if you're talking to a 6-year-old, you may have to change your words. You may have to change your interaction to get what you're looking for, or to at least get some answers from the kid, because you can't, using big words on a 6-year-old may not work when trying to find out if somebody is saying or doing something to them that they should not be doing. So just being involved, talking to them, being engaged, and I was always raised to, if you're in my house, then of course I got to know what's going on. So, going into the rooms, maybe different times. If you go in at 10, go back in there at 12, just changing your pattern. Don't always do the same, so that you'll know. Because sometimes, kids can be kids. They'll play like they're asleep. And then soon as, they feel like you're asleep, then they on their device. So just being involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another big thing to do is to always remember that as an adult, we were kids once as well. And while we didn't have the internet to infiltrate our home on a much easier basis, we still all went through things, and there were still things that we had to deal with. And if we can make sure that our kids know that we went through things when we were growing up, and we're here to help you go through the things you're going through, I think it'll make it a little bit easier to talk with them. But this is the campaign that we've put together. We've put together many tools for people to use in order to help start that conversation with their children or with the folks that they're caring for. We have a video on that we did for dangers of porn and sexting. We have a financial exploitation video. We have a grooming and youth sexual exploitation video. We have a labor trafficking video, and we have an online safety video. And we have fact sheets, and all of this is in English and in Spanish. So we have both versions there on the website for anyone to be able to use, so that it can be that starting point in order to start that conversation with folks, and to get them to understand that just because they think they're talking to a friend online doesn't necessarily mean that they're a friend. And it really takes a community of all of us to help get that awareness out there and to help prevent any future trafficking situations.
And these videos, I've had a chance to go and watch quite a bit of them, are very approachable. So you may feel like it's a big subject to kind of conquer with your child or with your loved one. These videos in this homepage make it very welcoming. The videos are animated, and kind of walk you through the steps there of what that looks like and what that conversation can take hold. And so it sounds like really open up to your kids. The more you show them that, you were a child once, how this kind of goes, and be relatable, the more that they're going to open up to you and tell you kind of what they are struggling with. And a lot of times we can feel like, as a young adult, maybe nobody else has it this way, or nobody's going through this, and we turn to other areas where we want to seek attention, and maybe somebody's giving that attention online, but that person isn't who you think they are, and they know that they're using that attention grabbing to try and manipulate you, or do those types of things. So have those open conversations with your loved ones, with your family members. And if you're struggling on where to start, we're going to put those links in the chat for you.
Yeah.
Mr. Powell.
Alex, going back just a little bit, Jeff had mentioned earlier about financial exploitation. And sometimes we think of which oftentimes it happens. You may have a family member, a friend, but you also want to consider and think about facilities. And I say that because I've been closely involved in a couple of close situations in which, because prior to my mom passing, she was in a facility, and of course I was highly involved. But one particular situation that stands out, as we think, I had an uncle in a different state who was also in the facility, who passed away, and once my father and I, went to, make sure everything was there, getting everything situated. And I specifically waited to not say anything about any funds, trust funds, and things of that nature. But we had gone, nearly 2 days getting all of his belongings, inventory, and all of that good stuff. And they never said anything about his trust fund. Now, my uncle was in a position or condition where he could not speak, he could not do anything for himself, and he was in the facility probably, I don't know, 2 years maybe. And as we were getting signing the final paperwork, 2 days later, after we get to the facility, um, I posed the question, trust fund, and they looked like, they were never going to say anything about it. But and I specifically waited to see what was going to be done. But my uncle had nearly, $3,000 some dollars in his trust fund that they weren't going to say anything about. So, and I said that to say we have to think about facilities and nursing homes as well, because it's not just a individual. It could be a group of individuals. So just
Mm.
something to kind of throw out and think about as we talk about this important topic.
Yeah, and a lot of those facilities, I know sometimes they will have those that they take care of just sign over their checks, their Social Security, those types of things, or maybe some of the providers that take care of individuals will have their Social Security just signed over to the provider for housing, food, those types of things. And I think it's always best when the family is more involved, whether if your loved one is in the facility, you're visiting weekly, you're spending time at the facility, you're asking them questions, you know them best. And as you guys have mentioned, if you notice a sudden change there, maybe you should dig in a little bit further and figure out why that sudden change is happening.
Hmm.
And then we also
It,
go ahead, Mr. Davis.
I was going to say, sorry about that, but you brought up one thing that made me wanted to mention another section is another thing is in the state of Alabama, familial trafficking is very high, and that just means that there's a family member that is trafficking one of their loved ones or someone that they're responsible for taking care of. So, as a person, when you're on the outside looking in, don't just assume if you start seeing these changes in a person and the only people that they're ever around is their family. You may want to get authorities involved and have them investigate that, because it could be a situation to where a family member is trafficking that person for whatever reason. It could be for money to pay rent. It could be for money to buy drugs, for all different kinds of situations. But in the state of Alabama, a family member is trafficking other family members is another high target area.
And I imagine that those go pretty unreported because there are not many outside people that will be able to see those changes in behavior or that exploitation if that individual is only around family members that are trafficking them.
Right.
Yeah. And if you do think that something like that is happening, we mentioned you can always call 911, you can always report it to the authorities, but you can also do that anonymously. That's correct?
Hmm.
So
That's
if you
correct.
feel like something is going on and you feel nervous, well, I don't want them to know that I called, don't have any fear there. Make the report, make the filing. They'll go ahead and take on from there by sending people out, doing reports, those kinds of things. But your name doesn't have to come up in conversation at any point during that process. I'd like to talk a little bit about success stories. We've talked, some pretty grim things here, the statistics, the facts about trafficking worldwide. But do we have any positive stories, success stories about those that are being exploited and they got out of their situation?
Um, Given that human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, and 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 has become more intensified, we want to be mindful of names and mentioning any names, but of course you can turn on the news and see success stories of this happening in our own neighborhood, schools, universities, communities, our own backyards. Um, So just being mindful of when identifying success stories, because we don't want to, heighten, make things worse for an individual who's going through. But as I've worked in this field for nearly 25 years, there are several cases in which people are charged with the crime. So it is a success story when someone is rightfully charged for committing the crime, because that's one way to say that we're paying attention, and those who wrongfully do this, will pay for it. Another particular case, I know of a DHR worker who had to travel to another state to pick up a youth who was involved, so to speak, and brought that youth back to the state. So that is a success, because she was, able to keep that kid from, you know, uh, being furtherly, harmed even further. So
Hmm.
that's a success without, giving any other specifics. Of course, Jeff mentioned family member exploiting. There were several cases that I was involved with, or had to work with. And one particular case stands out, in which a 12-year-old I had the privilege to work with um, was being exploited by a grandmother, and that's a huge concern. But bringing awareness, bringing light, shedding light on those individuals who's actually committing those crimes. So in that particular case, the grandmother was charged, and the youth was able to get some help that she needed. But she had gone through that, for some years before it was caught up with. So you think about the trauma and the damage that has been done. More recent, there are several cases more recently in which people were charged or in the process of being charged. And I say you want to be mindful of names and things of that nature, because we have some high risk cases where the alleged individual um, may go after those individuals who are trying to investigate. So, and those are cases that has happened, even right here in our state. But if you turn on the news, you see it happening in high schools, in grade schools, in universities, in homes, in facilities. So just being mindful and shedding the word when every chance we have to make people aware, and so we could at least get this under control. So that's a little bit that I could possibly share. Now we could go on and on, because like I say, I've had 20 some years and I've seen it happen time after time. But that's why I'm very thankful to work with Fowler Davis to get this done. To make sure that people of Alabama can bring some awareness to it. And even with some of the law enforcement I mentioned earlier, the case that I had a conversation over this weekend, a law enforcement agency, individual was telling them that they were being trafficked, and the law enforcement agency did nothing. Now it was a different county, but I did give some phone numbers, so I'm not sure what but just kind of paying attention. If someone say that that they are being exploited for some reason, it might worth looking into.
Yeah,
Always
I didn't mean
give
to
and
it the benefit.
say that, but it just came out.
I'm sorry, Mr. Davis, you were saying?
I said always give it a benefit of the doubt, like Darryle said. If anyone says anything or there are any indicators, it's always better to have it investigated and proved to be not what it looked like than it is to not say anything and have it continue.
It won't do any harm to make the case and dig in and figure it out. But sometimes the silence, what is the saying? All it takes is for good people to say nothing and do nothing to let evil prevail. So you got to speak up, and part of tackling that, $150 billion industry, second fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, is to start by spreading awareness so others are familiar with it. So it doesn't seem like something that only happens on the TV, but it does happen in communities, and that's where we can, start to change this around by having awareness there and making action on it. Now, what would you say to somebody maybe that has been exploited in the past and is getting out of that situation? And Mr. Powell, you mentioned the word trauma. Um, how do you go about, consoling these individuals and trying to help them get past this trauma and onto the life that they want to lead?
Well, there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I say that because sometimes people feel like, they've been involved, you know, they're traumatized and it's there to stay. But, you know, get them involved with some professional help. Those who that specialize, anybody just can't talk to someone about this. So getting them in touch, connected with specialized help, connecting them to the right people, and uh, getting them to understand that there's hope. They have hope. They can turn things around, and they have people that's willing to help them um, change direction, and not allow that to continue to traumatize and them, focus on that traumatized events, because it can be devastating for an individual to go through that. And once they are able to reach a certain stage, then maybe they could help other people, because typically for those ones who've been through it, it tends to be a little bit easier for them to help someone who's going through it. So
Mm.
if you hadn't been through it, it's hard to kind of relate to what an individual has gone through. So getting them, connected to other people, and able to, into schools, to talk to the younger ones, um, about it. So that's a little bit on my spiel on that.
Yeah, I think that getting a peer network would be one of the first stepping points in there, speaking to others that have been through it. And then, I think it's important if you always want to go somewhere to be able to reach out and be in communication with somebody that's been there and done that. And they can kind of show you where your obstacles are going to come from. And they can, relate to you and speak to you on that level. It can really show you that there are different opportunities out there in life, that some of the environments or situations you've been a part of don't have to be part of your future. And reaching out and getting help, speaking to others that have been through it, it will be a big part of that success for you. I came across an article that was really hitting this on the head, that ACDD and Fowler Davis are really leading the charge for human trafficking awareness in the U.S. Are you seeing this conversation? I know you mentioned another conference there, but are you seeing other states really start to spearhead this as well?
Well, just conversation. People are interested. I've had a couple of conversations in which other states were kind of fascinated about how the approach that we're taking as a state, and that gives you joy that people are looking at how you're doing things. And Alex, if you could recall, we did an interview some time ago, and that was one of my emphasis, or one of my focuses, to be a leading state on something and do it well. And I think this is a project that has really, really, you know, reach high levels of, across the state, across the world. And there has been some conversation with Fowler Davis and the U.S. Institute Against Human Trafficking, in which, you know, there's a possibility that, the materials and that Fowler Davis has done will be a part of the training curriculum. And when that happens, that will be a huge success for us as a state. But yeah, we've been communicating with other states in regards to what we're doing, and people are, and I highlight these success stories that we have, these projects that we have with the other state agencies, the National Association, Department of Health and Human Service, the feds, and this is a huge success for us, and other states are looking at it. So
I've heard that these videos are getting watched all the way around the world, countless times. Mr. Davis, what is the thought process that goes into making these videos so impactful, and the design process behind them so that they reach the maximum audience and get digested, so that that message sits? Is there a secret
Yeah, when
formula
we
to creating these videos?
It's really there is sort of a secret formula, but it's very common sense. And what we do at Fowler Davis is we try to do common sense marketing. And when we were speaking with Darryle and his folks and about the need and the need there to have a prevention campaign, we really set into developing the creative and the fact sheets, the information, the social media campaign. Right now, we have the campaign that's blanketing the entire state of Alabama through social media to push this prevention campaign. But the main thing is we wanted to make sure that someone that was watching the video that had a developmental disability or an intellectual disability, that these videos would be on a level that they could understand it and make them feel comfortable to reach out to a trusted person, whether that is a family member or whether that is a neighbor or a friend. We wanted them to be able to be able to understand it and to feel comfortable, but we also needed that information to be there to inform the caregivers and the family members that are truly trying to help them, so that it starts a conversation with that person, so that they never get into a situation of there being trafficked.
Mm-hmm. I love the video format. It's easily accessible online, easily digestible, and you see a lot of the trainings, even in colleges, classrooms, high schools, classrooms, a lot of that training is going more toward the video there. Now, these aren't the first videos that Fowler Davis has been a part of. You guys have made documentaries, short films, including Hidden Gem, which was said to be the most likely to inspire social change. If you could tell the audience a little bit about Hidden Gem and kind of the background there.
Yeah, we were partners on a project several years ago to produce a short film called Hidden Gem. We entered it into several film festivals across the country and human trafficking type film festivals, and all to really kind of get the word out. And what we really wanted to do was to create a visual of some real life stories that have happened and that continue to happen even today. And that's kind of how we got our first foot forward into the human trafficking prevention realm, was to produce that video. And if folks would like to see it, they can go to our nonprofits page. We started a nonprofit back in 2020 to help other nonprofits create awareness for situations and what they're working against. And our nonprofit website is FowlerDavis4Change.org. And that movie is there that they can watch in our project section.
And for anybody that's going to head over there, just a little brief intro. So the first part of that Hidden Gem series there is somebody at a gas station who is obviously being exploited, trafficked, and there is somebody in a passing by situation such as a restroom that notices that they're suffering, and it doesn't sit well with them, and they take that action to contact the authorities, and that individual is able to get out of that situation. I definitely recommend going over. We'll also put that in chat. Now, the 4 there is the number, correct, or is it spelled out?
No, that is correct. It's FowlerDavis4Change.org. And the main thing for folks to take home, whether they're watching the film, whether they're seeing our ads or our videos for the campaign, is if you see something, say something. I would much rather for someone to see something, say something, and it not end up being what it looked like, than to not have said anything at all and that person not get the help they need.
As we come to kind of the conclusion here today, we always like to ask, are there any upcoming events, whether that's Zoom meetings or in-person events, that you recommend anybody in the state of Alabama or in the country attend to learn more, to continue spreading the awareness?
I don't know any upcoming, but what we do as we communicate and collaborate with Fowler Davis, any upcoming events that we are aware of, we send it out on our contact list. We put it on our website, and so that people will have an opportunity to know or learn what's available. And I would highly recommend that for those newcomers to go to our website and look at what Fowler Davis has done. And it, like you said, you can't look at one and not look at the rest of them. It's just, it draws you in. You look at that very first video, and there, I appreciate what Fowler Davis has done in the amount of time space. Sometimes people can't sit down and watch uh, hour and 30-minute clip. So they're broken down in manageable minutes clips that can lead you to the next one. And 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 of course, um, other events or opportunities that arise, we will make sure that it's on our website, as well as you, Alex, send it to you, because I know you have a great audience that you get information out. But um, nothing at this particular time.
Now, you guys are just wrapping up the health grant. That's off the table now. Is that passed, or is that at the end of this month?
It's off the table right now. We're actually in the process of putting those things together. I think Friday was the deadline. So we're going to be looking at those, see what the council board will be considering funding next. And speaking of that, I'm very thankful of the board who saw fit that we start this project with Fowler Days, because from that point, if the board would not have approved of this, we would not be here. So it's a special thank you to the board, special thanks to the staff who's been dedicated with everything on board with Fowler Davis. We communicate frequently, and that's special thanks with Fowler Davis, because they're the one who actually did the work. We just approved and fund, and they took off with their creativity, and it's very, very eye catching. It's really needed. It's valuable. So special thanks, and then of course with you, Alex, I think you helping us get the word out, and that was one of the things that I talked about in DC last week. We have several outlets that we get the information out, and I think we are on the right track in Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, you can do great work, but if you don't share it with others, it doesn't really make a difference there. You can be the smartest
Yeah.
person in the world, but if you sit in a room by yourself, you're not going to help design anything. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think an individual or a family member could benefit from hearing, take away from today's conversation?
The main thing I would say is if you're want to know more information on this topic, and you feel like you might know someone that is in a situation like this, definitely go to the website. There's tons of information there. There's the videos, the fact sheets, as well as all of the resources to help you report this situation and to get that person help. I think that's the biggest takeaway.
Well, I'd like to say thank you both for your time this morning, spreading this awareness. I have watched a number of those videos. I've watched Hidden Gem. And audience, you guys need to get on this website. It is in the chat. So after we're done here today, go watch those videos, share these posts. If you see something from ACDD, Fowler Davis, come across your Instagram, your Facebook, your social media, share these. It is the second largest, fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, human trafficking. It takes all forms: sex trafficking, labor, financial trafficking, exploitation. If you see something happening, you need to say something. Even if it ends up not being that, it is better to say something and have it not be that than to stay quiet. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and end our broadcast today. And if you guys would each give a wave to your cameras and say, see you next time, and then you can exit out of this window. We'll take you out of the. Thanks again, guys.